our program, but we decided we still need to get Clark on board and invite us home. Invite us to come to invite Clark to come to our webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you, Professor Clark Kellogg, a dear friend from Porto Business School, a professor from Porto Business School for many years now. Professor at UC Berkeley, Haas School of Business, a professor of innovation and design thinking and creativity, founder of the Berkeley Innovation Group, and a dear friend of mine. And I'm so proud that, Clark, we can get you for the first edition of this Beyond Now webinar series. Thank you for coming. I see you now. You have nice weather in San Francisco.
It's lovely.
Welcome, Clark. Thank you so much. For taking the time. I know that you are in the middle of classes, and some of your students are connecting live. And the reason why we decided to invite Clark is not only because he's a great thinker and a great professor, is because we also wanted to navigate a little bit through some of the topics, some of the concepts that you have been working at the Berkeley Innovation Group and during your classes at UC Berkeley, getting all the inspiration from the main tools and the main mindset that you use during the application of design thinking for innovation, and how can those tools, that C-suite that you so well describe of the design thinking, how can it help us to steer this current moment we are living in and navigate through these turbulent waters?
Thank you, Rui. You are too generous with your introduction. The only thing that's actually decidedly true is that you are a good friend of mine, and I value that above all the other accolades that you cite. I want to begin by, acknowledging that we are more linked than ever before to you in Portugal by a terrible phenomenon. And it's a linkage that is shared with everyone on Earth right now. Put into that context, it is staggering to think about what we're all united by. But I want to put it into a little different context as well. I'm 68 years old. I've been through a lot of life at this point. And so for me to come to this moment with you has been the journey through the threat of nuclear annihilation, the wars of Vietnam and the great social upheavals of that era, the assassinations in my country of some prominent, wonderful, hopeful people, stock market crashes in '87, in '98, in 2008. We've been through so much, and it all has been so frightening. There was SARS, there was AIDS, and yet this one is different. And what's different about it? It is a deep threat to our lives on the order of climate change. That's another topic that we'll get to in a bit. So if you are feeling that this is frightening, you should be. And I'm not saying this to create fear, but this is very real and it's very powerful, and it's the biggest phenomenon I've seen in my longer life. And one of the things that people talk about when we talk about, for example, my president, is that he never tells people the truth. And the power of truth in a crisis like this one is unassailable. And so the truth is that we are in a very dangerous moment of financial, of emotional, of health. And I don't want to minimize it in any way, shape, or form. Some people say, well, the air is clear, and it is. And Mother Earth has an opportunity to heal like we haven't given her a chance in 50 years to do. And those are good unintended consequences of the pandemic. But there are other things that are also important to think about. And I want to talk about, thank you for that introduction to the design thinking pieces, Ray. I want to talk about how design thinkers and how design thinking can help us in this time. And it's not only about this moment, tomorrow, last week. It is a little bit longer perspective on it because we have a ways to go. So if I could, I'd like to show you some slides that I have put together for this. And I promise they're not going to be long and complicated. Let me just see if I can share my screen here. Yeah, there it is. Takes me a moment to pull all of this up. There's the share, and now I'll launch this. So you should be looking at an orange background with a coronavirus germ in it and brackets around it. Is that what everyone is seeing?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes.
Well, so this is our introductory slide, and what is bracketing the coronavirus is a symbol we use in design thinking. Many of you may recognize it. The symbol of diverging and converging, and this is one of our main mindset pieces.
Clark, sorry, do you mind if I interrupt you?
No.
I'm getting the feedback. Sorry, I'm getting the feedback that the broadcasting on Facebook is having lots of problems, lots of cuts.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much. Let's resume. Thank you so much for joining again the This Beyond Now webinar. We don't know how much you heard, so I will resume just by saying thank you so much, Clark, for connecting and for being our first guest. We were supposed to be together at this moment at Berkeley if the world hadn't changed the way it has changed in the past 2 weeks, and what a few weeks it have been. The reason why we wanted to start with Clark was to grasp a little bit, take advantage of the mindset and the tools and the way of thinking that Clark uses on design thinking and how could that mindset, could those tools be useful for us to navigate through this crisis and to find a little bit what will be a better light towards the end of all this nightmare that we're all living. Clark, once again, thank you so much. I ask all of you that are connected that please keep your microphones muted, and then we'll open some Q&A later. But the floor is yours, Clark. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Rui, and thank all of you for migrating over to what seems like a more stable platform. And so we'll just move forward from here. I was saying earlier that this is a remarkable moment of time that we're in, unlike anything that I've ever lived through. And I've lived through 68 years of events of world affairs. And this is unprecedented. And I say that because not to be fear creating, but to acknowledge what's real for us. Never in my lifetime, through many different kinds of global catastrophes, have we faced something like this. So from that perspective, I want to try to speak with a truthful heart and see where we go with this. I'm going to put a few slides up on the screen and just talk briefly with those. It will take me maybe 10 or 15 minutes to run through these. So I will do that now and adjust your view so you can get to this. And this should bring us to a slide that has an orange background on it, if you're all seeing that. If so,
we can see it. We can see it, Clark. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Well, that's the coronavirus inside the middle of this, and here is the coronavirus inside a microscope. And we're working with an invisible force, but it is made visible all over the world. And there's a lot of things going on. You all know about exponential growth, and we've had the exponential growth of the pandemic. We've had the exponential spread of fear, and we've had the exponential spread of isolation. And when you put these three things together, the disease, the isolation, and the fear, in exponential growth, we're facing what feels like a huge, imponderable moment, but there's more to it. When we add into it the decline of stock market, the decline of employment, and the decline of people's capacity to make a living, the whole setup looks very complicated. It is the most powerful wicked problem that we've ever had on the earth. And wicked problems are what design thinking was made for. So we have some choices to make right now. I made this choice for about a month of just putting my head down and not wanting to know anything. And you may relate to this as well. It was nowhere near as serious seeming as it is today, but it has grown to be the global pandemic that it is. And in this time, I don't know if you will relate to this as much as I relate to the next slide, but I find it to be a very important idea, and that is this, that we need to learn the difference between our intuition guiding us and our trauma misleading us. And I say it in terms of trauma because we are traumatized. It's scary. And so this distinction, and I think it's hugely important, between our intuition guiding us and our trauma misleading us is an important idea just to hold while we talk a little bit more about some of these ideas. And in a time of extremes, like this one, it is not the time to be meek. It is the time to let our intuition speak, but also to be extreme. And this quote, "When in doubt, be extreme," is very appropriate here because, as the health professionals have said, it's much better to overreact and have a minimized pandemic than to underreact and have it grow even faster and further. So this idea, a design thinking idea of looking at the extremes, is very useful to us. When in doubt, be extreme. Now there's some downsides of this, and my class that we were just in before this hour, and some of those students are with us now, have seen this next slide before because I clipped it out of this morning's paper, and it is a headline that says, "The pandemic tempts leaders to seize sweeping powers." And so in a time of extreme, in this case extreme crises, the tendency of authoritarian governments is to gather up a lot of power and never give it back. So there's an antidote to that, which is the idea that we need to take care of each other. And by this, I mean the idea that we could use our design thinking skills and mindset to approach the way we work and live and are during this time with a slightly different set of North Stars, if you will. Last Friday, my little company has a Friday morning event called Virtual Espresso, which I'm happy to invite all of you to. And a woman said something last week that really struck me. She said, "The antidote to burnout is not rest, it's fulfillment." And that idea was like a light bulb going off in my head, because the notion of fulfillment, and you might relate to this idea, if you're really tired or you're burnt out or whatever, we do rest, but rest and then more rest and more rest does not solve you. It doesn't heal you. Fulfillment heals you. And I spent some time thinking about that, and I wanted to share with you some ideas about just that concept by talking about what I came to call the design thinker's C-suite. And for those of you who are familiar with design thinking, it is a methodology for solving complex problems by putting people at the center, by human-centered design is what we call it. And of course, it's a little bit different than a corporate C-suite, but it's not exclusively the domain of corporate leaders, nor is design thinking the domain of non-corporate leaders. But let me chat with you for just a few minutes about what the C-suite of design thinking is. The first thing I want to talk about is compassion. one of the C's in the C-suite. And compassion is having genuine feelings for other people. It's caring about them in a very authentic way, with affection and generosity and concern. It is being thoughtful and decent. Now, this is not rare stuff, but it's important to embrace this as a North Star during a time of a pandemic. Being compassionate with yourself is critically important, and compassionate with your... If you're not on mute, please do mute yourself.
Yes, Anna Silva, hi. Can you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks. And being compassionate with your colleagues and your classmates lets them know that you are sincerely interested in their well-being. And we really need that right now. The next C of the C-suite is curiosity. And curiosity is the urge that we feel when we want to know more about something. It's the desire to learn more by asking questions, exploring, investigating. And it's listening more deeply to the people that you're with. We don't, as a rule, practice listening very well. But this state of mind of being a deep listener is a gift that just keeps on giving. And curiosity, that authentic interest in other people, it separates from wonder by just a very thin membrane. And so being curious with your family or with your roommates or your colleagues during the pandemic may well give you new insights into who they are. And everyone needs to be heard right now. The third C of the design thinkers C-suite is creativity. And creativity is the ability to transcend traditional ideas and rules and patterns and to create new ideas, new methods, new solutions, even new friendships. And this breaking out of the box idea is so essential right now because if we stay in the orthodoxies of what life used to be, we will surely perish. But creativity is not the domain of the few, of the creatives or the artists. And in fact, that's very much the basis of good design thinking, is that everyone has the capacity to do this. There's a fellow named Michael Griebko. He's a neuroscience research scientist at University of Washington here on the west coast of the US. And he says about creativity that it's our brains just doing what they do. And that's very true. Our onboard creativity is our brains just doing what they're meant to do. And so in this bigger picture, the C-suite helps us to survive and thrive in this time of chaos, of indeterminate information with which to make decisions, and also of great ambiguity around all parts of our lives right now. The last thing I'll say about this is, for us, that is design thinking professors and practitioners, we feel quite at home in the midst of this, not because it's good, but because we have a mindset that allows us to fix a different North Star than ones that the medical world needs to fix, that governments need to fix. But we can find inside of this great power in using our skills to create solutions, to help where we can help, to be optimistic. And also, we're very nimble. So we, meaning all of us in the sound of my voice, can jump into a project and help something come into being that will help the medical staffs, help homebound people, help all of us whose spirits are sagging to come alive a little bit and to keep hope alive. The thing about this C-suite set of skills is they're mobile. They don't need to be anywhere but inside your heart and your mind. to give you joy and hope and resilience. And I want to show you just a few more thoughts before we conclude my prepared thoughts. And one of them is a quote from Steve Jobs. And I want to put this in the context of changing the way we live and changing the post-pandemic world. And here's what Jobs said: "The ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." And I think this is the challenge of our moment in history right now, is every crisis creates change. Are we going to embrace that change by default or by design? Of course, we think that this is done with the use of design, the C-suite, the capacity to hold optimism, to operate among ambiguity, to tell a new story. And here's a new story that someone sent to me, and I will read it to you. It's the story of the pandemic. I can't quite see this slide. I'm going to try to move this panel up. Here we are. "And the people stayed home, and they read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows. And the people began to think differently, and the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and to heal the earth fully as they had been healed." And so with this prayer for a different tomorrow, I will close my comments and turn it over to you, Rui, for some additional conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Clark. This is super inspiring, of course, and you're reflecting on the topics that that truly are common and global. We've been complaining about the fact that this was caused by globalization. Globalization caused this, amplified this, but in a sense, this is a global crisis. This is a global pandemic, and the solutions for the crisis are global. Countries that are now dealing with the situation are learning from what China did, and from what South Korea did, and what Singapore and Italy and Spain, and we are trying to avoid making the same mistakes, learning from our brothers and sisters out there in the planet. So globalization didn't start this. Globalization is the essence of our planet, is the essence of our living as a society, as a community. The way we do business is global. The way we have friends is global. The way we fall in love is global. And the way we hear music is global. The way we read beautiful poems that were not written for this pandemic, by the way, people might think this was some time ago. They are truly global, and global will be the solution. Global will be the way we fight this, and the way we come out of this, and absolutely inspiring. Can you share a little bit with us? Of course, we are all, there's some voyeur, all of us. How are you dealing with this in the US? We have been talking about. You were asking how you're dealing down there in Portugal. So what, first and foremost, I'm not going into the politics and all these crazy things. What is the overall feeling of, first and foremost, people, the community? What is the overall feeling there?
I think people divide into two camps, and I'm, of course, making a generalization that is absurd, but here goes. If your income and your job and your life has not been terribly disrupted, in other words, if you're quarantine in your home, but you're still able to work and take care of your family and receive a paycheck. You have an entirely different view of what's happening. On the other hand, if you are one of the 5 million people who have lost their jobs, or the 40 million people who have been told to go home and you'll get a paycheck later, and if you're one of the 175,000 people who've contracted the disease in the United States, you have a very different reality. And so, again, the gap between the haves and the have-nots, which is growing so extreme here, is the same gap we're feeling right now. Me, my family, the students that we work with, some of whom are on with us today, and probably many of you are, we're okay. In the literal sense of, have I missed a meal? No. Am I terribly inconvenienced? No, I live in a nice big house because our children are grown up and now we have more room here. And so my wife and I are enjoying aspects of our time together. But that's not everyone's experience. And the frontline medical workers are experiencing something that is incomprehensible in the emergency rooms of hospitals. And so really it's very different for different people. And for those of us who have emotional stability and health, it's a different experience than someone who is feeling the isolation in very difficult and different terms. So it's there's heroes, there's good citizens who are staying socially distanced. There are people whose altruism and helpful nature is coming to the fore. And situations like this make everybody more of who they are. It makes the oppressive government people grab more power, as that headline said. It makes the helpers help more. It brings out people's true nature. And fortunately, here, the true nature of most people is very good, and we're taking good care of each other.
So compassion is truly being used, right?
Yes.
We see this. I have been struggling a lot with the idea and the concept of social distancing, and I dispute that. I don't think we are in social distancing. We were forced to be in physical distancing, but actually, socially, we are closer than perhaps ever. I've been in the last 2 or 3 weeks talking to people from my family I haven't talked with in months or even years. Every Saturday afternoon, I share a virtual beer with friends from kindergarten and high school, which we live so close by, but we were not taking a virtual beer every Saturday. We're getting closer and closer. On the other hand, we're seeing the society mobilizing to support those that are in the front line, to support those that are taking the risks. We're seeing here in Portugal some outstanding social movements, community movements. We have a Tech for COVID-19 where the tech startups gathered. Actually, we just published a podcast about this today. And then suddenly they went from the idea of helping the hospitals, and that idea turned into a project. That project turned into a small startup. That startup has now 4,500 people working. It became a big corporation in less than 2 weeks. It's social experimenting, as Ramon O'Callaghan, our dean, has been saying. It's social experimenting. But compassion, the first pillar of the design thinker C-suite, has been truly a glue, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has. It was like it was somehow underneath. We had to create human-centered approaches for things to, call for people to move back people to the center of processes. But then suddenly, do you think this is a people-centered moment where compassion is truly the fuel of our relations?
I think you said it perfectly. It is. And of course, those stories, those hero stories, are the ones that we will hopefully take forward and embrace and make more of our lives with those stories. Uh, the beautiful gestures that people are making, and I don't mean just gestures, that minimizes it, the actions they're taking are stunning. I'm working on a project with a lot of people to 3D print face masks and other personal protection equipment. And this has turned into a network of 94,000 3D printers across the world. And it just grew. It grew like the internet grows. And this is people stepping up, doing what they can do. And if one owns a 3D printer, you do that. If one is a chef, you cook food for people. If you know it, it goes and goes and goes. And what I love about this compassionate moment is that it shows us what we really can be. And the pandemic will recede, and some of that compassion will recede. But if we are able to see this as a new moment when we can change things, then that compassion and that curiosity and that creativity needn't recede. And this is the difference between personal growth and intention that we all have manifest over, and government, society, and other norms that have been imposed on us, or we have accepted, through the development of culture in cities and government and all. So that we're at a really interesting moment. We can choose differently because we've seen what can happen, and what we're seeing happen in the face of horror is a beautiful, beautiful story.
Absolutely. Let me jump into curiosity.
Mm.
And I will really literally paraphrase you by reading from your blog. Clark writes pieces of wisdom in his Big Ideas blog at the Berkeley Innovation Group website. And on curiosity, you're mentioning this. Curiosity is the urge you feel to know more about something. It is the desire to learn about things by asking questions, investigating, or exploring. It is listening more deeply and not judging. The state of mind of being curious is like a gift that never stops giving. A thin, porous membrane separates curiosity and wonder. Being curious with your family or roommates and colleagues during the pandemic may give you new insights while providing them with a stable anchor to share their fears and frustrations. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this? So you did a nice shift here by using curiosity as a means to support ourselves. Let me give you an example. Just this morning over lunch, my youngest son, 8 years old, was asking me about the death toll figures from the US and his curiosity about the thing. And I was like, should I tell him exactly the blunt reality? But it has led us to discuss within our family some topics that most likely we would never have discussed. Death being discussed by an 8-year-old, and how can we, tranquilize him, keeping the kid, calm, not anxious about all the situation, in a comfortable zone. So can you share a little bit more of your thoughts on how curiosity can be helpful during this moment?
Sure, thank you. One of the principles that we teach around design thinking is that curiosity is better than judgment, and that's a big idea in my life, at least, which is judgment stops creativity, judgment stops innovation, and judgment stops action, because it is, by its nature, judgment is the end of the story. We're done. I've decided. Whereas curiosity keeps it rolling on and forward. And it also, more importantly, in the case of, say, the story of your son or any of us, curiosity gives us the capacity to enliven ourselves. It actually generates, in the mindfulness meditation context, curiosity generates energy. in the Eastern movement philosophies, Tai Chi, we move chi through our bodies using curiosity as the fuel for that. So curiosity is a marvelous human capacity to want to know more, to dig deeper, to not judge, but to learn. And learning and its next door neighbor curiosity are things that bring us fulfillment. They bring us satisfaction, and we also know more, so that when we talk with people and we're interested and we're curious about what's going on in the world around us, we're not shutting the door, we're opening the door. And that is the great invitation for us to live with compassion and shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues, neighbors, friends, and families as we go through the pandemic.
And finally, and now we want to wrap this part and then try to open, if possible, to some questions. I don't know how we'll do this. Most likely, I will ask people to raise hands or to write some questions on the chat box. But let's go to creativity. And this one is apparently easier. We need to be creative. We had to be creative, to change Porto Business School for full online, full remote in 3 days. We had to be creative to understand how can we all work from home. And can we do that? And with our kids, and can we now keep on providing them with education, full remote and full online? And can we keep the economy running, even though we have shut down almost everything? And how creative will we need to be to deal with the consequences of the pandemic, but also of the measures that we needed to implement to fix the pandemic, and we will have to deal with the disease and also with the cure, but because the cure is not exempt from pain, and we know it will be an enduring pain, at least for some time. Everybody is understanding that. So creativity is obvious. Is it? Will we be creative during this process? Because right now we're all trying to do the right things, but probably doing the right things might not be good enough. We might need new right things. We might need new ways of thinking, new ways of connecting with each other, new ways of working, new ways of learning, new ways of loving, new ways of hearing music, of understanding beauty and perceiving beauty. What's your take on this?
I really approach it maybe from the other side of that argument, which is, why wouldn't we be creative? And I say that not being snarky or tongue-in-cheek, but given what we're facing, and we know that doing more of the same won't save us, the call for creativity is like common sense in a certain way, isn't it? John Cage, the avant-garde music composer, who's passed away a few years ago, he said at some point in his life, I don't know why people are so afraid of new ideas. It's the old ideas that scare me. and I think that just perfectly sums it up. Creativity is not the unique purview of artists or designers. It's, as Michael Grebko says, it's what our brains do. And it's so obvious in times of challenge. Then the world erupts with its creativity, but why does it then go put it back in the drawer when things settle down? To be honest, I can't figure that out. I just don't understand that. But that's just one person expressing bewilderment. But creativity is, of course, it's the passing lane of life. Creativity is what brings us the new ideas, the new things. It also brings us intense fulfillment. When you paint, when you sing, when you dance, when you fall in love, when you create a meal, these are all fulfilling, energizing, creative acts. And why would we put that away? Life is remarkable, and made even more so when we live it through that creative, compassionate, and curious lens. I think that we're just at the beginning of a new dawn of human-centered activation. At least, of course, that's my hope.
You see the glass half full, and I hope you're Absolutely right. Let me well, as we migrated here to Zoom, we have the opportunity to be a little bit more interactive than we would have been. And I see that Andrea has already raised his or her hand. I don't know if it's a he or a she. Andrea, you have a question for Clark? And you need to unmute your microphone. Don't forget. Andrea?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Hi, now I can hear you. Hi.
Hi.
Can you introduce
Hi.
briefly introduce yourself
Yes.
and share the question, please?
Okay, so I'm Andrea. I am Italian. I'm living here in Portugal, and I'm a student at the Port Business School this year. I'm taking a post-graduation in business management, actually. So thank you very much for your insightful intervention, Clark and Rui, yourself. I was thinking about the impossible being possible after all. In fact, everyone is basically running fewer and fewer miles. We're basically no longer going to shop in the malls. We started quite suddenly being working remotely. I've seen, I can quote the case of my hometown in Italy. I'm not aware about the situations here in Portugal, but I was reported that first aid enters. So people going to the first aid dropped by 80 to 90%. It's very, very, so people used to, I would say, almost abuse, to leverage on the first aid to get some services. But now that people are scared about this disease, they are giving up. So the question is it really needed? Or sometimes we make irrational choices. One more thing, my daughter was telling me that now she is to win being bored. Let's say she found a way to watch movies with her friends. I think I can quote the application. It's called Rave. I was not aware of this, but they can simultaneously watch movies and films and talk to each other and chat. And in the end, I play chess with my kids. So after all, I'm summarizing this: the impossible is possible after all. A paradigm shift. That's it.
Thank you, Andrea. Clark, any comments?
I agree with Andrea that there's lots of the bubbling up of creative solutions and some delightful stuff going on, and it's
Absolutely.
fun to see that happen. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyone wants to put out a question? If you open your participants list, click on the button participants, you have an option there, says raise hand. You can use that if you want to throw in a question. Here we have Andre Soares. Hi, can you share your question, please? Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Andre. I'm a Java and MBA student from this year.
Clark, Andre should have been with you.
I know.
Yes, I should have been there. Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. I was just wondering because my background, I'm a scientist. I'm a biochemist, and most of us, or at least I felt like there is a disconnection sometimes between science and society. And there is in these situations where like the medical doctors and everything, they are working to solve people's problems. The scientists are also doing that for now. So I think that from now on, also people will look at the science and people making science in a different way than they do it right now. So that's
that's another shift that is a long time coming. I live in a country where science has been debased by politics, and it's changing, and it's high time.
It's wonderful. Let me pick up on a comment from the chat box from Daniel Macedo. He says, we always look for new things without consolidating current things. You want to comment, Clark?
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. I'm sure there's a larger story behind it, but think about what's happening right now in your homes. There are no new things except perhaps food. And how delightful is it to, I mean, I've spent a lot of time just doing little, handyman fixes around my house, and it's immensely satisfying. But we're making do with so much that we don't need. If we weren't in the pandemic, I mean, we're eating all of the food. We're throwing nothing out. We're not needing any new clothes. We can wear the same thing for 4 days and then turn it inside out, and you've got another 4 days for you. So this is a way to rethink how we consume, and what are the new things we're looking for? The new things we're finding are friendship and connection and compassion and joy in the small things. So the new things are actually, in this case, the human responses and the human connection that's new. Well, it's old, but it's become more valued now. So I don't miss anything from the commercial world. I'm fine. And that's a lesson that will stay with us. I don't need to be the consumer. Rui, you're on mute, Ray. You are on mute.
Sorry, the host had muted me. The back office host had muted me. And I think he might have been telling me, it's time to go or something. We have a question from someone that you might know. Hi, Renata.
Hello, good afternoon. Hello, Clark.
So nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Clark, I have a question. So how do you envision life after this pandemic?
Ask me a hard question next time. I think I have a hope, and then I have an imagining what it might be. What I envision is that we will, because we'll have to, be somewhat thrifty. We'll be resourceful. We will still be digging out of this for some time, and I think that there'll be some shifts. I think some of the shifts will be the miracle of technology that has linked us during this time. We will also revert to understanding how lovely it is to simply sit with somebody face to face. I think that we will de-commercialize some of our habits so that it won't be my favorite activity is going to the mall. I think it might be something different. I think it might be a little more value-based. I think we're going to see the skies in San Francisco have been so clear for the last 2 weeks. It's like nothing. And I've lived here my whole life. It's like nothing I've ever seen. So the earth may be more revered. As was said earlier, science will be respected more. And I think that we'll understand no one is not going through this on the whole planet. So we'll always remember this. And I think that it may build into us all a little more compassion about how we live together, how we share and support each other, and how we value the world we live in and the time, the moments that we have in it. That's my hope, Renata.
Cool. Anna, we have a question from you. I think you might.
Hi.
Yes. Hi.
Hi. Nice to meet you, Clark. We have the pleasure, and it's very interesting talk. We have the pleasure. I had the pleasure to meet you a few years ago. I don't count, like 4 or so. And I was back there at PBS on a workshop, and we were talking about ambiguity. And we, at the end, were discussing it about ambiguity-based management and new forms of management based on ambiguity. And so right now, how do you see the future, and how will the future of management, because from now on, it's definitely ambiguous, and ambiguity has to be very much taken into account. It was great to see you again. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Nice to hear your voice again, which I recognize, even though your picture isn't on the screen. Well, so management is going to be really different, I would imagine, because the command and control and seeking only of shareholder value is an idea that is not sustainable anymore. And I think that we will need to embrace management styles and leadership styles that make room for the things that we can't control and understand. And that's an evolution of management. And I think we will see ambiguity be dealt with in a very different way. It's not risk, it's just ambiguity.
You know, I've been seeing some trending topics around the impact, of course, this is having also in our planet. A positive impact, if you come to think. Levels of pollution are lower than, well, decades in all the major cities. Today, I started seeing some of the sustainability evangelists adapting the flatten the curve chart to a sustainability versus economic growth. You know what I mean? So if you calm down on the economic growth, you will have in a bigger length. It will not, exhaust our planet. So it's quite interesting, and I do agree with you. If you allow me, it's not a question; it's more of a comment. I do agree with you. If we already knew that the way to go on management would be to move in towards a more holistic, triple bottom line approach, where where we need to definitely solve the equation between economic growth and protection and regeneration of the planet. We were still seeing the discussion one versus the other. We will need to find a way, us working in innovation, we will need to find a way to solve the equation. We can have economic growth while protecting and regenerating the planet. And I think if you'd ask me what would be my trend spotting activity right now, my attention is there. I had also a question here on the chat box. Fred, an architect from Porto, is asking you. It's connected a little bit with the questions from before, but perhaps we can go into specifics. How is the world going to change? In what areas do you think the bigger change is going to occur?
Yeah, well, you're all asking me these questions that are really hard. Give me an easy one next time, please.
Yeah.
But Fred, to your point, I think that, and I am an architect, so I have just enough knowledge to be dangerous to answer this question. I think that we're going to see the sustainable practices accelerate. Everyone has seen the improvement of air and the quality of nature and surrounding us, and the earth feels like it's breathing more deeply. And I think that that's not going to go away as a recognized thing for humans. And I think that what will change a lot is, as Rui was talking about, this binary choice between growth and destruction. I think we might be able to dissolve that. The accelerating in architecture, the accelerating use of green design and rational thinking about living buildings and how cities operate. I think this is positive. And I think that the biggest change that I think will occur is going to be around a much more powerful movement toward mitigating climate change. We've seen how terrible the terrible consequences, in this case, of the pandemic, but we know that even more consequential and even more terrible are what will happen with climate change if we're not actively working to solve that. So I think that this is going to ramp up to be the same kind of energy toward climate. And in that case, the largest change will be that the world turns wholesale toward healing itself and living within the constraints of the natural capital that the world has been so abundant with for so long.
We have another question on the chat box. I will ask also the participants. I will only have time for yet a final question, and I already have a candidate for it that has risen its hand. Mr. O'Callaghan, can you please wait a little bit? Can you please wait a little bit? I have a previous question from the chat box, which is an easier one. It's from Edgar Silva, and he's writing, "It looks like Big Brother has helped China to contain the pandemic, constantly monitoring people. Do you foresee our world being a global Big Brother from our governments, and won't that kill our creativity?"
It's a great question, Edgar, and I think that breaks into two pieces. One is, will we be able to, when needed, have a very top-down, directional form of government for things like pandemics, and that's a great thing. I don't think that I don't foresee the world, to your question, becoming a big brother all over the place. I think that the spirit of creativity and of innovation and of making things better is so baked into people, and even in China, under authoritarian regimes everywhere, people are still innovating. People are still, the spirit never is quashed. So I think it's useful to have a militaristic, dictatorial set of powers right now. And then I think they need to recede because they're useful at times, and then at other times they're not useful. So we need to be in control right now with very much top-down management of the world. And then when it recedes, we need to let 1,000 flowers bloom again.
Some people are commenting this on the chat box, and it was exactly what I was about to add. Yuval Noah Harari's article in the Financial Times last week was quite interesting. People read it as a pessimistic approach. I actually read it as an optimistic approach. Of course, the decisions we make today, this is very important. Decision makers are under pressure. Let's think of all the people in the governments, okay? And they're under pressure to make extreme decisions that are life-death decisions in seconds and minutes, and based on information and data that is still not absolutely validated. It's a combination of scientific data and empirical analysis of things happened a few weeks ago, and we're building knowledge on the go and trying to make decisions with knowledge that is being built on the go. And then most importantly, or more important, the decisions that we are making, that they are making, we all are making, it's how fast we can fix them, because most likely they will be wrong in some aspect of it. So the kind of decisions, and this was the point of Harari's article. Someone already shared the link. Thank you, Elena. She shared the link already for the article. If anyone hasn't seen it, his article is about the choices that we make today, and how they will, of course, they can determine the way we get out of this, if we accept or not more authoritarianism. Like you mentioned with the piece from today's newspaper there in Berkeley, how we are accepting the powers, how are we accepting this state of emergency declarations, how are we accepting the fact that our freedoms are being, in some sense, controlled partially, and so on. Of course, these decisions and the way we all accept them or not, or question them, or build them together as a society, will make, of course, I think, a difference when we come out of this. And so, but I'm optimistic. I also wrote about it this last week on Portuguese newspaper Observador. I am fully optimistic, and I think that Harari, though people thought he was being pessimistic, he was being like haunting, and now he was just touching the points and making the case for the better decisions, the ones that will get us out of this better as a society, as humanity. So yeah, I'm sorry, I went too long. Mr. O'Callaghan.
May I talk? Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hello, great. Ramon. Hi, Clark. So it's not really a question, it's just the final words, since I am the last one, just to thank you for your participation in this event, and just to let you know that don't worry about the hard questions from Rui. Life after COVID is exactly the topic that we will be having in 2 days. We have another seminar coming, which I'll be chairing in that case, and I use the opportunity to tell the audience that please do join us again on Thursday for another webinar, in this case with former Dean Sumitra Dutta, former Dean of Cornell, who is an expert in many things, in innovation, but he has agreed to precisely talk about some of these issues. Okay, so there's more to come. We have more in our in store for you. Okay, thank you all, and I get back to Rui.
Wonderful. This was some of my footnotes now. Indeed, on Thursday, we will be back. We will start having these webinars every Tuesday, the Beyond Now seminar, and every Thursday, the Dean's Lounge seminar, where the Dean and the Associate Dean of Porto Business School, Ramon O'Callaghan and Patricia Teixeira Lopes, invite deans, former deans, and people from other business schools around the world to share also some ideas about the current situation and beyond the current situation. So it's every Tuesday, Beyond Now webinars at 6 p.m. Porto time, and every Thursday, the Dean's Lounge webinars also at 6 p.m. As Ramon said, we're having Sumitra Dutta next Thursday. And by the way, I can also announce that a week from today at 6 p.m., we're having our dear colleague from Columbia University, New York, Jay Daya. And we will go a little bit more on the financial side of things. Clark, any final words of wisdom you want to share?
I would only say what I say to everyone that I have the pleasure of being with these days, which is to be well, stay safe, and breathe deeply. It's been a pleasure to be with you this morning. Thank you for inviting me, Rui, and thank all of you for listening in today.
Clark, thank you so much. Stay safe. We will keep in touch. We have some business to take care of this next few days, and we will keep on working together. Thank you, everybody, for migrating fast. This is a very startup-like mode. We are all into where we change fast, and you all migrated here to Zoom. We have, some people were asking, we have recorded this session indeed. We might have some technical issues with it, but hopefully, if we can share this recording with authorization from Clark, of course, we will let you know how can we share this. We will try to figure that out. Everybody, thank you so much. Please be back next Thursday at 6 p.m. Please be back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. And all of you, please stay at home. Please stay safe. Bye-bye. Bye, Clark. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you, Rui. Bye.
Thank you.